Good evening, everyone. Hope everyone's having a good week so far, and welcome to the first Cape 31 webinar. We're going to do a good discussion here on trim and tuning and all kinds of little tips on the Cape 31. And we have a really full agenda for tonight's presentation. And we have a few things to cover for sure, so it's going to be really good. So, a couple things we're going to cover tonight is the history of the Cape 31 and kind of the North Sails involvement in that. And then we're going to go through our tuning guide and some speed tips. So, I guess the first thing we'll do is introduce everyone on the call tonight. So first, from Newport, Mike Marshall, are you with us here tonight?
Yep. Looking forward to it. Looking forward to talking about the Cape 31 and a little bit about the sail designs and hearing what our biggest expert here in the class, Ben, has to say as well.
Yep. And for those of you who don't know me, I'm in Annapolis, Maryland here. I'm Allan Terhune. And we also have with us from the UK, our class leader for the Cape 31, Ben Saxton. Ben, you with us?
Yeah, hi guys. Thanks for coming along. Looking forward to a little collaboration between UK and USA teams here with the Cape 31.
Great. So Ben, why don't you take us through a little bit of the history of the class and our involvement with it as you've been in from the ground level as we've gotten going.
Yeah, so in parts of the world, the Cape's relatively new, but in other parts it's existed for a while. So it started off in South Africa, hence the name, the Cape. And they were racing with panelled sails there, and for example, only one jib. Then we were lucky enough for some guys in the UK to bring across one boat, and they raced it on IRC. So in 2019, we made a IRC quiver of sails for this boat, fully equipped out with North Sails 3DI Raw. And that's where the class sails for the following few years have been, that's where the class rule started and came from. And we basically make little improvements on these sails year on year and little tweaks as the class rules change. For example, we're allowed a few more head sails now than we were originally. And also it's just as we learn, as we go along, as we get more and more experience. Like I'm the class lead here, but we had 16 people from the UK Sail Loft racing in the class last year. So there's a lot of input and learning that keeps on going on. So we were very successful for the last few years, but there's a lot of effort going into making sure we're even more successful going forwards.
Yeah, the amazing part is now there's fleets in the US and I guess in the Mediterranean and South Africa, obviously, and there's some rumors of boats going to Australia here in the future. So it seems like the class is growing pretty quickly, which is a good thing.
Yeah, there's boats in Australia and Hong Kong, around the Mediterranean, US. It's cool.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll continue by just talking about the North Sails inventory. So we have one mainsail that is an all-purpose mainsail that's used across the wind range, wherever you are in the world. And it's really good. It's kind of doesn't really have a weakness. At the bottom here, you'll see I've mentioned carbon full batten upgrades. And actually, the sails come with carbon leach battens as standard because, they're nice Grand Prix sails. But we put glass battens in the top because of if the sail bangs into the runner, it's more durable. But a lot of teams that race have 2 or 3 different stiffnesses of top battens for carbon, which helps basically if you put stiffer ones in the wind, it helps the mainsail twist and depower. And the opposite in light winds, some softer battens help the sail be a bit deeper. Then we have on the jibs, there's 4 jibs. Last year there were 3 jibs, now there's 4 jibs, because we wanted to fill the medium to strong wind range a little better. So there's a J1 and J2 that are completely full size as per the class rules, but also IRC area, which is why one of the beauties of the Cape, like the boat is really good on IRC and ORC and racing in one design. So one sail does all. So you got 2 full-size jibs. The J3 is a tiny bit smaller. That's just because there's no point in having 3 full-size jibs. You might as well start making them smaller for when it gets windier. And then the J4 is OSR size, so offshore regulations, which helps. I've seen some people doing some 190-mile races in the Cape, some offshore and short-handed. So yeah, it covers you for everything.
And it's interesting. on the inventory there been, just in terms of the jibs, most of the updates have been, with revolved around the class rules, but also, just on our own, selves updating for this year, to power the front of the boat up a little bit more and make the jib a little bit deeper. And especially in the light inventory, just to keep the boat a little less, make the boat a little bit more powered up in light air. Is that kind of follow with what you found?
Yeah, absolutely. So the boat's flat bottomed and really wide transom, so it likes to be tipped over in the light winds, and then it's a race to keep it flat on the flat surface once you're overpowered. So exactly that. We've powered up for light winds a bit, moved the 1 and 2 downrange, slotted the 3 in the gap, and it's fast. It was already fast, but it's even faster now. The only other thing we have mentioned here is there's a storm jib. We kind of don't expect you to sail with it, or I haven't seen one being used, but it's built to be used because it has to, and it has to perform its function. But it is a weight-saving exercise because you have to carry the J4 or similar sail in the class rules. So you might as well carry the storm jib, save the J4, make it last a bit longer. And that's the fundamentals of it. Going into the downwind, it's pretty... We should start by saying the boat's primarily raced up and downwind, so beating and running, but you can reach with it. It goes really nicely on IRC and reaches. So 2-sail reaches, when we race on handicap, like a 2-sail reach, and you put a lot of damage into the other boats you're racing around, it's really a strong leg for it. But 3-sail reaching is also good. So we've got the A3 reacher at the bottom. The boat doesn't lend itself naturally to a code 0. We have built a few and they can work, but handling it takes a while because there's only one halyard and one tack line. So we've kind of preferred an A3 with the same drop line patches and handling systems as the other spinnakers. So you can hoist a soft sail, drop a soft sail, and it acts like a code 0. Then moving on to the downwind sails, there's basically 4 sails that are almost full size, different weights, slightly different cuts, depending on whether you're sailing in light winds or strong winds.
And from my understanding, similar to the upwinds, where your sort of J1, J2 are your workhorses to the inventory. In this case, in the downwind, your A2 really is the workhorse of the inventory. It really does, your A2 and your A2 minus, in that, you're looking for that sort of very versatile, powered up kite so that you can sail good VMG angles, but you can also sail the angle that the fleet's going as well. And is that what you found as well, Ben?
Yeah, absolutely. The A2 is a fantastic sail, and it's definitely the one that's used the most, the workhorse, like you said. We haven't changed that since 2019 when we first made the downwind sail. It's just perfect. If you want to go high, you can go fast and attack the boat in front. And if you want to soak low, you can soak low. It's a really nice, versatile sail, works in a lot of winds. So yeah, it's really nice.
Yeah, I think your point before about how the prod is really long compared to the mast height, and it just kind of shows that the time and detail to this sail designs, how important it is for a boat like this, because it is unique in its geometry and how the sails fit. And the boat is like, all the kites are pretty long on the foot compared to a normal boat and things like that. So, you can even see it when you're off the boat and you watch the boats race. The spinnakers just work a little differently, but ours definitely seem to work great when it comes to sailing on the boat. Just the time and care that was given to them, it kind of shows through pretty clearly when you see them.
Yeah, it's fair to say we've got a nice speed advantage around the course.
Yeah, exactly.
And they are really big spinnakers compared to what would be on a normal boat. Your average spinnaker for a boat. These are massive, which is a lot of the fun of the boat. They sail really fast. You can sail to the rating on the rating systems. It's good fun to sail. So we have a lot of information on the North Sails website to help teams get up to speed. So there's a tuning guide pictured on the right here, and on the left we have a sail crossover chart, which this shows how all the sails that we've talked about in the last few minutes come together. And you can see there's overlaps between different circles or squares. At the top, we've got jibs. On the left, moving left to right across the screen is increasing wind range. So you've got the J1 top left and the J4 top right. Helix partly helps us come across and have these soft changeovers by active camber control. We can control the sail shape even more. Then at the bottom of the screen, there's the A3 for reaching and the spinnakers below it. Again, A1 in the left and A4 for strong winds in the right. And there's a little gap in there. Sorry, Mike.
No problem. Go ahead.
Yeah, there's a little gap in there that the boat doesn't like to do. It's like underpowered two-sail reaching, the little triangle half height on the right. You basically go high on a two-sail reach, bear away, pull up the kite and have a great time.
Yeah, and I think the interesting thing here, there's two points, and I kind of alluded to them a little bit before. You can see the amount of area that, say, the A2 sort of takes up in the range of your wind speeds, and the A2 minus, they kind of basically dominate the sail chart. And on the upwind side, you know, where Helix comes into its own is the fact that the J1 and J2 also dominate most of the sail chart. And just from the Helix structure in the loft, you can get a sail that's quite deep in light air to go quite a bit flatter in heavy air. And so between the rule changes, adding jibs and adding Helix to the sails, you're able to get, you know, sort of your workhorse J2, but then your J1 as well that can be deep and can get pushed well up into the range. So you've got these very powered up sails, which then allows that J3 to be slightly smaller, you know, purpose built more of a J3 to reduce the drag that the boat's seeing in that windier condition.
Yeah, it's not really a worry if you're on the wrong sail. You can pull the Cunningham and move it back towards the sweet spot. So it's really nice. And then moving on to the tuning guide, here's a little matrix from in the tuning guide that's on the website that I encourage everyone to go and have a look. So on the left, the table, it will show you, if you dive into the numbers a little bit, we have a base setting at 11, 12 knots. And the other thing that it shows is that the primary control is the forestay. So turns on the forestay, we go from -6 turns on the forestay in light winds to +8 turns in strong winds. There's a little bit on the shrouds, lowers, and D2s, but the main thing is the forestay.
Yeah, that just means to me, Ben, how critical it is to get your initial base headstay setting correct and just making sure it's constantly being checked over, and even after a day of sailing, just, you know, going back and double checking, because if that's off, it's going to throw this whole thing off. It seems to be to me, the critical piece of this whole tuning setup is making sure that 1710 number is correct.
Yeah, so the tuning guide will detail how to measure your 1710 measurement there on the right, the mast rate. But it is definitely worth checking, and it's worth setting your heel in range too. So then that's a millimeter measurement from the back of the mast to the front keel bolt. And once you've got your mast heel and your mast rake in about the correct shape, you can then tighten your shrouds, making sure that the boat is square. Sorry, the mast is square in the boat. Get your settings about right for base, and we recommend a pre-bend of somewhere between 40 and 50 millimeters, depending on personal preferences, you know, conditions, waves, temperature probably, yeah, and what you're looking for. But as always, reach out to your local North Sails guy or your North Sails friend, and we can help even more. We're here to help.
Yeah, and I think one of the actually really interesting aspects and important aspects of this is just the D2 adjustment as shown in the, you know, in the guide, and it's actually on the, you know, on the less adjustment side, which I think is very positive, because, you know, obviously there's a lot of time behind sending someone up the mast to adjust your D2s. So the more you can get away with without doing that, the more you can focus on what you need to in between races, getting the right jib, figuring out where to go on the race course, all that kind of stuff, without having to waste that time and effort of, you know, getting someone up there to adjust the D2. So I think that's a big positive part of it. But it does come back to the fact that setting up that base pre-bend in your mast is also pretty critical when you get the boat out of the box or out of the shed.
Yeah, we've spent a lot of time with top designers from locally in the UK Dave Lenz has put a lot of time into it, our global head of design and North, but also collaborating with the best minds in the business around the globe. And we've got a really nice mainsail design, like you say, that it kind of just works. Okay. So moving on to how would you, when you're on the water, set up your mast and understand your individual mast bend? So you've done a dock tune, but how do you perfect it? Because, you know, everyone knows seeing settings on the dock are not necessarily the settings that we sail with. So I really like this setup here. It's a picture from actually about a year ago, but as you can see, smooth is fast. The sail looks really smooth. If you look really closely, you can see some slight creases in there, but smooth is fast, and I think that's the biggest thing. If you've got big creases anywhere, they kind of show overbend to me, where the sail's too flat or the mast is bending too much. So I like the overbend in the Cape 31 to come on first, where the lower diagonal white stripe is there in the bottom third of the mainsail. And you'll generally get that if you're sailing out of wind range setting. So if it's 18 knots and you're set up for 12 knots, because if you haven't tightened your settings, then the mast can bend when you pull the runner to max. But if you're overbending at the bottom first, it implies maybe you're not on the right settings, maybe you don't have enough chocks, maybe you don't have enough D1. Whereas if you're overbending up by the numbers first, it kind of implies maybe your D2s are too loose, or have you just got too much chocks in? Because if you really straighten down your mast, your mast in the bottom third, and you're sailing with, let's say, only 20 mil of pre-bend, then the bend's got to go somewhere. The mast is being pulled, so it kind of pops into strange places. So we've worked quite hard to have a natural, consistent mast bend across the mast, and I think that's why having a pre-bend of 40 to 50 millimeters is really nice.
Well, I think your point though, Ben, of, you know, obviously we have a tuning guide, right? But until you can set it up perfectly on the guide, but if you go on the water and you're not doing these visual checks, it could still not be right, right? So it is a bit of a two-step process, because you can have 40 or 50 mils of pre-bend, but if it's not exactly in the right spot in the mast, or, you know, your Ds are a little out of proportion and the bend moves differently on the height of the sail, it would change your tuning. So, you know, having the second set of visual, you know, triggers to understand what you need to do to set the boat up right is really important, I think.
Yeah, and a big oh, sorry, Mike.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, yeah, a big crease implies that you've over flattened the sail in a certain area. So if you have the big crease low down, you've probably lost your return on the bottom batten. So you're going to be struggling for pointing. If your bottom batten's fallen off and pointing at the leeward corner, then you're not going to be pointing, which is what happens if you get the big crease. Having said that, creases aren't necessarily a bad thing, you know, like they happen, but you can use the Cunningham to pull some of the creases out, or you only have a small crease rather than a big crease. But maybe the lesson is if you're set up for 12 knots, don't go to max runner just because it's windy. You can hold off by a little bit.
Yeah, and to that point, exactly. It's not that you're looking for no overbend wrinkles at all, because you could get rid of them all simply by pulling the Cunningham on and smoothing the bottom of the, you know, the main out, and they would all disappear. You're sort of looking for them to be, you know, in that lower section of the main 30 to 45% of the way back. You know, that's the full extent, probably no further than that. And then in that upper section of the main, maybe 20% of the way back, and then you pull the Cunningham on to, you know, to pull the draft forward slightly in the main, and that kind of removes them. But in this photo, if they were to take the Cunningham off, you would see those overbend wrinkles, I would suspect, going about that far back in the sail, just flattening out the entry a little bit.
Yeah, and then what do you guys think about checking side bend on the rig?
I think side bend is obviously doing it tack to tack. You know, you're just sailing upwind, checking, making sure the rig, especially when you're powered up in breeze, is nice and straight and in column. But the one thing to remember is that, you know, with the runner blocks to weather on the side of the boat, not on center line, it'll pull the mast tip to weather with it. So you want to be careful about not chasing the fact that the mast tip is being pulled to weather by the runners, as opposed to the mast actually sagging to windward or poking to windward. So it's a really important thing to kind of know in your head that the mast tip will be coming to weather from the runner block, from the load on the runner block, and just to sort of take it into account when you're looking at your side bend.
Yeah, and you can see if you look at the boat, let's say on port, you have a look up the mast, stand at the gooseneck and look up, and then you tack over and have a look on starboard. You can see whether the side bend's the same from one tack to another, and that might give you a hint as to whether you think your D2s, are they correct, or are you tight on the D1s on one side or the other? So that's useful. Okay, so we'll delve into upwind trim a little bit more. I kind of wanted to show this photo to show that body weight can be a really big thing for upwind trim. There's a couple of characteristics of the boat that we talked about earlier, of a flat bottom, a wide transom, which is what makes the sports boat. It's what makes it exciting to sail, and it's what makes it plain and have the righting moment. But you can see in light winds on the left-hand photo, the crew have worked really hard to get the weight forward. I think the helm's the furthest back person. You can see the tactician to leeward there looking at how good a job he's done. But they're not sailing with loads of heel. So a little bit of heel gets the wide transom out, but you don't want to overheel because otherwise you're giving away leeway or sail area. So it's a little bit of heel with the weight forwards. Then in medium winds, you can see the weight's still a long way relatively forwards. There's 3 people hiking out and 1 person at the back, which I think if you have too much weight back, you get a stern wake, which you want to avoid because a big stern wake and dragging the stern is drag. And you don't want to lift the bow out either, and it's quite a flat boat. And then I think there's a message in heel here somewhere as well.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like having a constant angle of heel going upwind, especially when you're fully hiking, is pretty critical. And I think the one thing for me is the boat is just not that big, so we have to remember that weight placement is fairly sensitive, right? I mean, it's a pretty small boat, really, if you think about it. And in light air, getting all that surface out of the water has got to be critical just to reduce some drag. But then as soon as the breeze is on, keeping constant angles of heel and keeping the boat sitting in the water correctly has got to be, it's as important as anything else. I mean, just the boat is hugely inefficient if it's not. It's a little boat. It's got dinghy tendencies that you got to be careful of when you're sailing it.
Yeah, completely agree.
I think that weight trade-off is just simply in the fact that, as you move further back, as you can see in the middle photo, your righting moment arm is much longer as you move that weight further back. So it's that trade-off between how far back do you get to increase the righting moment arm versus how much are you then digging on the left-hand photo, the stern wake and the stern into the water and creating drag that way. So it's going to be always through that trade-off.
Yeah, I think the boat's being sailed really nicely in all 3 of these photos. Okay, and then diving in a little bit more detail, we just wanted to talk to you about the Traveller in a little bit more detail. Allan, do you want to talk us through this?
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing, because of the amount of in-hauling on the jib and kind of keeping the boat balanced is just realizing that even across the wind range, light air to pretty breezy, the Traveller doesn't go much below centerline, even at all. I was commenting, in the lead up to this, if you look at the medium wind photos there where the Traveller car's like at the tiller, maybe in a car width below, that's the most I've ever seen the Traveller down on one of these boats. Just because the sheeting angles are so tight, it's really hard to let the Traveller down. So, if you look around all the top boats, Traveller's up really high and the main is pretty twisty to keep the boat on its feet and keep the jib powered up so you're not getting backwind. But it's a lot kind of TP52-esque with the Traveller's really high all the time.
I think at the end of the day, one of the fastest ways to stop this boat going upwind is over trimming the jib and letting the Traveller down and just closing the slot. And the thing is just going to go sideways and heel over and be very unforgiving for sure.
Yeah, and the boat responds really well to having the power put into it in light winds by having the Traveller up. I think it helps the jib. You get a little lift in the jib, but you also get some helm on the rudder, and it tips the boat over sideways.
Right. I mean, it feels like you need a little bit of helm load, but you don't want too much. It's a pretty fine balance, but you can't just have dead helm either, or the boat will wander. You need something to keep it tracking. So, having the Traveller, if you look at the bottom left photo, the Traveller's pinned at the top there in light air just to generate some power and help heal the boat over, as you said.
Yeah, and beyond that, you tend to sail around with the jib quite deep in the foot. You know, that seems to be a fairly good mode in the boat. The boat likes power in the front half. And so that photo on the upper right, where it, you know, it's quite deep, that's probably the max depth. But you can see that it's not light air there, and they're still sailing around with the jib quite deep. And that's just another reason as to why the Traveler just can't, you know, you've got so much return in the lower leach of the jib from that depth that you just can't let that Traveler down. Otherwise, you're almost immediately closing that slot.
Yeah. Okay. Traveler. We're happy with the Traveler. The good thing, this boat is one of the other great things about the Cape is you can hop in it and pretty much be at speed straight away, because it's relatively simple, you know, like there's not a million controls, that you've got a kicker, a Traveler, and a couple of sheets. So it does really respond to sailing under first principles, trusting your gut, using a bit of feel, and you can transfer skills learned in other yachts or sports boats or dinghies really well, which again suits the half amateur way that a lot of teams sail.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's on the next slide. I mean, I guess, you know, one of the things to talk about is the runner, because I think compared to most boats, you know, a lot of boats this size have a fixed backstay, right? So having runners definitely changes the dynamic, and it's pretty easily adjustable. So, you know, you get a lot of change in the boat by, you know, pulling the runner on and off, because it affects both sails all the time. So, you know, it's a pretty cool thing for the boat to have, because it's pretty rapid adjustment.
And that's borne out from, you know, in that photo to the right, you know, the backwind that you're seeing in the stripes and the main, that's borne out through the runner, plus also the Traveler height, plus how tight the jib's sheeted. And I know that, you know, Ben, you can speak more to it, but it seems to be that you're looking for maybe 10% backwind, and no less than 10 and probably no more than 30%. And if you're getting more than that, you're probably either not on the runner enough, too low on the Traveler, or the jib's oversheeted and you're just closing the slot down. And if you're getting too little, then you're potentially either too hard on the runner, not sheeted enough on the jib, or your Traveler's too high for your condition. But for sure, keying into the amount of, you know, the amount of backwind that you have in the back of your main is going to be a big factor between that and then how much your head stays moving. Is going to be, you know, big factors to drive your runner trim, Traveler height, and jib sheet trim.
Yeah, so you've got the runner is the one-stop shop. It kind of does everything that you want. When you pull it, it tightens the head stay, makes your jib look nicer. You can point, it flattens the main. You can sheet the mainsail back on, so you can really add power and take power away with a runner. And I spend a lot of time on runner and main sheet, and they're the two jobs that kind of talk to each other a lot. So you're definitely in speed loop when you're sat at the back on the runner. Yeah, you're absolutely right. When you're in medium winds and you've got a bit of spare power, I'm looking for it. So you've got the sails slightly eased. I'm looking for a little bit of backwind, but not too much. If you sheet the jib too hard, it's kind of stalled and draggy, and your mainsail essentially flap earlier first as well. But if there's nothing there, then maybe they're not talking to each other and the boat will be quite unbalanced, or you could get away with having your jib a tiny bit tighter and point a bit more. So yeah, looking at that mid stripe on the right hand photo, where we can see just behind the jib that it's not a perfect curve, it just lifts up at the front. Yeah. Okay. So moving on to jib trim, it's a quite simple control. So you've got the up-down control and the jib sheet are the main ones, and then the car goes in and out on the track. But it's a pin, so it's you can adjust the windward one whilst you're sailing along, but you're not going to change the leeward one. Then on the right photo, you can see that there's some spreader calibration, which I'm a big fan of. There's more details exactly where it is in the guide, but in light winds, we tried once having mainsail windows for it, but it's just, you kind of only need it when it's light winds, and it felt better to go to leeward and get a proper visual of the spreader. So yeah, and you can control the shape of the jib. So if you let the clew go up by increasing the up, then you have more twist and a flatter bottom. And when you pull the jib sheet down and the clew down, then you get more power.
Yeah, I mean, I think
you would.
Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead, Alan.
No, go for
Yeah,
it.
something that you had mentioned in the past there, Ben, was just about the how far in or out you're running on the, you know, the Thorpe ship track leads. You know, and it, to me, you had said that you were basically running no more than 2 holes out in, you know, and even some of the strongest breeze, as long as your main wasn't turning inside out, but mostly you're running all the way in. And looking at that lead, it looks to me like I would suspect that, you know, the actual tracks themselves, some of these super high aspect boats like the 52s or something like that, they've got tracks that can go into 2.5 degrees. And looking at that lead, I don't have the math in front of me to actually do it out, but it looks like it's probably closer to 6, which would explain why you're, you know, sitting in that in that range of a lot, you know, basically pegged on the innermost hole to you know, to keep the jib as inboard. Is that kind of accurate to how you've been sailing the boat?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think Alan will say the same from the sailing he's done in the US. But
Yeah.
the inside place of the cars feels like a really nice place. I wouldn't want it any further in, but
No.
I don't go any further out. So any further in, and you know, these
Yeah.
photos like in the bottom right that we have, any further in, you'd have too much drag and, you know, the sail would look like a bucket. So it's one of the things they've done really nicely here. Keep it nice and simple.
I think your point about the spreader marks though is critical, because the whole key to trimming the jib or setting it upright is, you know, getting your foot camber the way you want it, and then using your spreader marks to, you know, keep your twist profile exactly how you want it. And then as you adjust the leads, being able to kind of mimic, you know, that twist of the jib all the time. And it without those marks, it's almost impossible to do. So you know, especially if you have a boat, you know, if you're fortunate enough to have a boat behind you taking photos like this, and you can make adjustments and see it, it's from a trimming standpoint, it's critical, way more than, as Ben said, you know, having the window in the main to see it on the spreader. All that really, you know, just pop your head under and look, but having the spreader marks there is crucial to make sure you have the balance of foot shape and twist correct, in my mind. Like, you can't not have them.
Yeah. And you can see here as well that we are, that left-hand photo, those guys were really fast when it was windy, and you can see that's really windy there, but they're still all the way in on the jib car.
Yeah.
The other thing we can see in the photos is the controls are in similar places on the middle and right photos, but the jib shape in the bottom is very different. And the boat itself, a little Cape 31 quirk, is it's really sensitive to jib sheet tension. So you can sheet the jib really hard and flatten the bottom of the jib out. So like Alan said a minute ago, if you've got the correct depth in the bottom of the jib and you're in the correct space on the spreader, you're looking good. But it's really important to keep an eye on that stripe that we've put just a foot above the bottom of the jib, and keep a little bit of shape there, because basically it's easier to be fast. And if we're fast a higher percentage of the time, it's good news. Yeah,
I mean, it seems to me, you know, from, you know, you have, to simplify it, you know, you have the car all the way up, and it's just manipulating the, you know, the up down and the jib sheet to get exactly kind of the 2 proportions you want. If it's not as complicated as it looks, really, which is kind of going to what you were saying before. All the controls are fairly close together and simple to use, and you know, it's pretty easy if you just get it close enough on those 2 ratios to get up to speed pretty quickly.
Yeah, I mean, the middle photo, the guys they go really well as well. So they'll be going fast. It might just be a little bit tricky.
Right.
And the time, we should say, the time we would move outboard, when would you move outboard on the car?
I mean, for me, it would only be if the main is just constantly blowing up. It's just blowing so hard. But even then, I'd be probably trying to ease the sheet first. It's probably pretty rare if you're going upwind, you'd lower the car that much, in my opinion.
Yeah, like, right. Yeah, if you're really overpowered, you can go out 1 click, maybe.
Maybe, but it would be like last resort, I think.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah.
Okay, so then kind of bringing together all the little details of what we've been talking about here into seeing the whole picture. So there's a couple of different rig shots here, all of good, well-sailed boats. And we can see that an easy to sail setup that we've talked about, where you twist the sails a little bit, keep the boat flat, can be nice, which is kind of the right 2-hand photos. And the guys on the left were working a real height mode here, but with the sails in so hard, it can be hard to sail.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, it's keeping the boat, balanced enough that it's easier to sail. And I think the one trick, three of us talk about this is sometimes if you want height, you just have to push on the tiller a little bit. And we see this in other boats like the J70 or other boats. It's not that different than this. It's if the water's going over the foils and the boat's going well, if you need height, you just kind of steer higher at times. You don't necessarily want to trim tighter because the boat stalls and it becomes really unforgiving.
Yeah, that really tight sort of tight leach look with flat sails is going to be, pressure hits, boat's going to fall over, pressure goes away, boat sits almost straight upright, as opposed to the more twisty, slightly deeper setup where the lower leaches of the sails are engaged. It's just loading the boat well. As the pressure hits, the top sort of automatically opens and it just frees the boat up to be able to go fast. And it, and then it can use the aspect of the foils, the aspect ratio of the foils, to be able to gain or decrease the leeway as you go faster and faster, which is going to get you height itself.
Yeah, so by lower leach engaged there, you're saying that in the bottom draft stripe of the main, so around the lowest spreader heights, when we look at these photos, we can see the leeward side of the sail for the little bit. And that's where that return there is where you're driving your height from. So you don't need to sheet the head of the main in to be able to get the height. You're getting it higher off your bottom batten.
Exactly. And you could almost argue that the top of those mains, and you can in the photos, the top of those mains is more open than the photo to the left. And it comes down to but the lower leach is almost the same engaged. And so that's just making the boat that little bit more forgiving.
I think we should move on to downwinds now.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, the more exciting times.
Yeah, where the boat excels.
Yeah, exactly. No one wants to hike the whole time. They want to go fast.
Yeah. So there's in my head, there's three distinct modes. You've got light winds, medium winds, and strong winds. And in light winds, you're soaking. The jib's probably down. You're using your A1 or your A2 minus. Weight forward with a little bit of leeward heel, and it's nice and smooth, and you're steering to wherever the kite trim is telling you to go. Little secret here is that the main is still a massive sail, so I'm a big fan of playing the kicker and main sheet a lot still whilst you're going downwind in this condition.
So Ben, we actually got a question in the chat asking about how much pumping of the main you do going downwind.
Yeah, I think you can get a lot. Legally, one wave. And as the wind goes up, I recommend more because the flow over the sails is steadier. In the light winds, again, legally, you can't do it, but I wouldn't want to do it anyway because you don't want to disturb the sails. We're doing everything to get the sails away from the boat, and whoever's got the sails furthest away from the boat is going to be going the fastest. So pumping the main will create noise that you don't want in the more important spinnaker. Then we move to, so weight's really far forwards in the light winds on that left-hand photo. And then the aerial shot for the medium winds here is to show that the weight is pretty spread across the cockpit in the medium winds, because again, we don't want to drig the transom, but we're on the flat planing surface with everybody on the windward side. And this is, again, on IRC and ORC, this is where the boat's going to be doing real damage to your competitors. So everyone hiking out, you've got the jib back up. If in doubt, the jib trimmed quite loose because you want the kite to be nice flow. So you want the jib as loose as possible without flapping.
It seems like, between these three modes is, one of the key factors is just active crew weight, right? I mean, the lighter air, you're getting forward and maybe even to leeward to kind of help get the back of the boat out of the water. And then when you're in the lazy planing kind of medium wind, it's moving fore and aft to get the boat kind of on its lines correctly. And then as soon as it's windy, all the way back just to let it rip, right? I mean, but it's, again, dinghy-like active movement. The crews that are static just aren't going to go as well.
Yeah, and this photo, the medium wind photo here of bow 31, I remember when this was taken, these guys were flying, and their bow height was just a really nice height the whole time. And they pretty much sailed past everybody. Yeah. And then sorry.
the interesting thing about that medium wind is I think that, you know, you can in general err on having the jib up because of the distance between the pole and the front of the boat, with the pole being so long. You can in general err on having the jib up a little sooner than you might in other boats where, you know, you're closing down that slot. And so you can actually use the jib a little bit more to increase the flow on the main and get the jib, you know, just up that little bit sooner, and the kite's still working just because the pole is so long. And that's probably what extends that medium wind range, which, you know, really is quite a large range for this boat when you have that 8-2 up and you're in that middle range.
Yeah, I think as light as 8 knots wind speed, and you've got the jib up. Yeah. And then the other fun we've had a lot of days like this. The right hand photo, the really strong winds, where it's a game of getting your weight back, getting your weight out. That again, I know Alan said he didn't like to hike the whole way around the course, but if you lean out, you can sail faster too.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, you have to, right? I mean, it's the same thing. You have to keep the boat on its you know, heel angle, and if standing in the back, if the boat's rocked up, you end up putting the bow down and you just go slower, right? So you got to hike against it to get boat ripping, get your apparent wind to move forward. It's a huge advantage. So you're right, got to hike.
Yeah. And the long pole and the big kite means you're sailing high angles generally across all the winds. So you're driving through, let's roughly say 90 degrees, in whether it's 5 knots or 25 knots.
I'll just say us Americans think it looks cold in that photo on the right.
I think that's midsummer.
I know, but it still looks cold.
It's cold.
Yeah, it looks cold.
I think that's most. So then we move on to a couple of questions which might be coming in on the chat, I think.
Yeah, we had a couple come in, and I guess the first one is, you know, what is the plan, you know, for our team going forward into the year? And I guess I can answer from the U.S. side is, you know, we have the Southernmost Regatta coming up in about a week, and our team will be there. It's the first, you know, U.S. regatta this year, and there's going to be, you know, a handful of boats, and then the boats all move to Fort Lauderdale for a couple of regattas, and then up to Newport and San Francisco over the summer. So there's a fairly active U.S. schedule. And I'm sure Ben can talk about what's going on in Europe, but you know, the North team will be at a lot of these events. I don't know, Ben, what's the European schedule?
Yeah, there's a European circuit around the Med, and a Europeans at the end of the year in November. And there's a UK circuit, which is mainly around Solent. Yeah, and they're going to kick off in the spring. But there's a lot of global work. So I'm actually out in the States in a month or so's time, and we do a lot of sharing between the whole global North Sails network. But yeah, really exciting times for the Cape 31. The racing's great, whether it's handicap or in class.
Yeah. And the other question was, is this info online? And the tuning guide and the speed guide are online now. Is that correct? Yeah.
So go pop onto the North Sails website. Maybe the easiest thing to do is pop on there and search Cape 31, or just Google Cape 31 tuning guide North Sails. It'll pop up, and there's a lot. It's a big old document explaining everything from how to tune your rig to trim tips, like the builder's recommendations of 1.8 on the runner, but don't look out for 1.8 on the runner downwind, because it's measuring the forestay, not the runner. So you probably only want to see about 0.7 or 0.5 downwind, you know. But there's all the tuning tips you could want there. But it also importantly says reach out to Alan or I or whoever at North, and we're here to help.
Exactly. Well, it's getting late. There's been a lot of info here, and I think you know, everyone's head's probably spinning a little bit. So you know, the three of us want to thank you all for joining us here tonight. And I think on the next slide here, if you look, all of our contact info is there. You know, Ben is the global class leader, and you know, if you're in Europe, feel free to hit him up, or in the US, to be honest. And you know, Mike and I are here to help, you know, any of the new US teams, and you know, there's a lot of people here who are excited about it, and I know the whole North global team is excited about this class, and we're all looking forward to seeing where it's going to go and getting more boats out and seeing people planing around the race course smiling. And hopefully there's some warmer photos soon with people in shorts and t-shirts instead of full fallies. But yeah, it was great, and thanks, Ben, for all your help in putting this together, and hopefully we do some more of these talks and get more people sailing. So thank all of you for listening, and thank the two of you for joining in, and hopefully everybody has a good night.
Thank you.
Thanks, Alan. Thanks,
Bruce.
Ben.